Hello and welcome to yet another podcast on Boipatro VSC or very short term course. Today I will discuss about a study where the main objective was something else, and to achieve the main objective, uh, some something bigger was identified. Both are related to sustainable development of uh, mankind, and both are targeted to achieve sustainability and comfortable living of mankind. So today we'll discuss about a study which was originally on site selection, but ultimately it provided valuable insights on waste minimization from the sources. Now, generally, what happens, the site selection studies nowadays involve, or I will rather say, invariably involve MCDM techniques, that means multi criteria decision making techniques, and GIS. GIS means Geographical Information System. Now, the study was related to selection of a site specifically for landfilling and to develop manufacturing facilities for a textile industry. Now, what happened is in this aspect, they try to implement MCDM as a decision making techniques, and they try to use GIS technology to geospatially show the most suitable locations among all the locations that they have surveyed, right? But while examining the suitability of these locations uh, to be utilized as landfilling of waste products from a manufacturing hub, what happened is they find something very interesting. That interesting find was that how we can minimize waste from the source itself. How some factors indirectly contribute to waste reduction, right? So in total, they identified three different factors that, if decided optimally or objectively, can reduce waste at the source. Okay, so the first one is proximity to waste source. That means the landfill sites must be very near to the locations from where the waste is generated. So if you are developing a manufacturing hub, textile manufacturing hub, then your landfill site must be very near to that hub, such that the moment the waste is generated, it can be collected, transported, and deposited in the landfill site. In this way, what we can achieve is we can lower the transportation cost. We can minimize the transportation cost. And if we can minimize transportation cost, that means we are minimizing transportation. That again implies that we are minimizing the generation of highly toxic carbon gases and SPMs, suspended particulate matters, which are directly associated with associated with environmental impacts. Right? So if your site is very near to the waste generation source, then you can avoid these things. Right? So here what they say is that not only this study but several sources emphasize the importance of locating waste treatment facilities like incineration plants close to major waste sources such as existing landfills or domestic households or some industrial area from where source is generated, right? So if we can identify a landfill site near a waste generation source, then the requirement of transportation will be reduced greatly. And by this way, the generation of highly toxic methane gases and this SPMs can be reduced, right? And if we can reduce those, we can ultimately aid towards a sustainable environment. Just take another example of Delhi. The uh, the burning of hay is conducted in Haryana, and the impact is faced by Delhi, which is very far, not very in the neighbor, but actually Delhi is far away from the places where the burning is taking place, right? So that is just an passive example I have given. Similarly, if you see that if your uh, waste generation is going in Delhi and your landfill site is in Haryana, then how much distance the trucks that is collecting the waste will be required to go to deposit the waste? Just imagine. And while they're going to deposit the waste from Delhi to Haryana, they are releasing carbon gases, they are releasing suspended particulate matter, and thereby polluting the environment. Right? So this is one thing that was identified, that our site with for landfilling must be very near to the source generating the waste. Okay. Second point is that land availability and suitability. The present literature highlights the need to consider land availability and suitability when selecting sites for waste management facilities. So these includes factors like land use, slope, proximity to sensitive area, and environmental restriction. Now, if we follow all these factors like land use, slope, proximity to sensitive areas, environmental restriction, while selecting a site, what will happen is that we can maximize the capacity of the landfill sites because we have selected them very smartly, very objectively, by considering multiple factors. So we can be ensured that lot of waste can be deposited there, right? So just take an example. If you have selected a land where there is no environmental restriction, it is proximate, it is very near to the point from where the waste is generated. It has an ideal slope for landfill sites. The land use is also suitable for landfilling, like they are barren lands. Take, for example, barren and uh, deep, a land where the depth is little lower, the height is lower compared to the other areas of the city, right? So those type of land which is not utilized for any other purposes whatsoever, it is just a barren, unused, wasted land. And somehow, if it is nearer to the points from where the wastes are generated, then you can easily select that land for landfilling. That means depositing waste. So, as you have selected the land very intelligently, what will happen is that we can use the maximum capacity of the land. Lots of waste can be deposited on that land. And as a result, what will happen? As the waste will be concentrated on that land, we can use that waste to generate energy also in some location. And also, there are lots of environmental impacts of waste disposal. If your land is very not suitable for storing a lot of amount of waste, what will happen? The waste will overflow, waste will overfill, and it will ultimately impact the nearby areas. So, where maybe uh, those areas are used for living domestic purposes, they can be used. They can be used for parks, they can be used for offices, they can be used for schools. And as a result of overflowing waste, what will happen? The smell, the toxic gases, right? And also the toxic liquids that will ultimately contaminate the nearby source of water, which is used by the offices or the residential houses or industry for our drinking sources. Those things will also can be contaminated. But if we select the land very intelligently, far away from uh, not I'll not say far away from office area, but I'll rather say that a land which is very deep, whose depth is very high compared to the other areas of the land, such that anything can come inside, but nothing can go out. Right? Like you can take an example of a dry pond, which was once a pond, but now it is totally dry. You can use that land for waste disposal, waste deposition, right? So whenever you are selecting those lines, considering multiple relevant factors, then you can rest assured maximum number of waste can be stored there. And when a land can be stored for maximum number of waste, then you will not disturb other land. Correct? Because you see, if one single pond in the vicinity can reduce the chance of or probability of flooding multiple times. Because what will do is it will ultimately attract the excess water towards itself, and it will consume or it will store that water within itself, right? So the end product is that even if there is flood, it can always be mitigated if you can select a wetland for that purpose, or a pond, or a land which is very ideal to store water. Similarly, if you replace water with waste, if you select a land which is very suitable for storing waste, then it can store maximum amount of waste. But if your selection, but if your detection is erroneous, if you ignore many multiple factors and select the lands based on political interest or based on only economic factors, then that land can be selected, but it may not serve your purpose totally. So that is a suitable land selection is a very important thing for waste minimization. Third thing is that you must consider while selecting a landfill site the environmental and social impact on the nearby population. You consistently emphasize the importance of incorporating environmental and social criteria in site selection for waste management facilities. Consistently, you have to emphasize, right? So that is why what happened is this present case study that I have collected, it actually tried to select land considering environmental and social criteria. What factors it considers? Proximity to water bodies, air quality, noise pollution, and community acceptance. So they have selected a land area where the when a nearby community has accepted that yes, okay, you can use that waste land for waste storage. Because if you are selecting a land which is, say for example, used by the local population for morning walk, for the children of the neighborhood for playing, you cannot use that land for waste. If you forcefully use that land for waste, it will imbibe hostility, right? Similarly, if there is a water body nearby, right, proximity to water body, you can easily manage the waste. Management of waste means you can reduce the impact of the waste. You can dilute the concentration of the waste, right? And also, if the air quality is good, then also you can use it that land for land filling, because good air quality ensures aeration, and aeration ensures oxygenation. And as oxygen is a reactive gas, it will ultimately decay the waste very fast, right? So these are some factors where noise pollution is minimum. That location must be selected. Okay, so there are various and multiple factors that can be selected, and then ultimately you are rating them with the help of the MCDM techniques, right? So what this study is suggesting is that at least include the environmental and social criteria in your decision making while selecting a land for landfilling. That is what they are telling. Because if you do not consider environmental and social criteria, there might be problem from the nearby population. Okay, and as I have discussed in the last point, yes, proximity of water body is good, but also we must ensure that that water body is not as near that the overflow of waste will contaminate that water body. So you have to ensure both, right? So selection or consideration of environmental and social criteria, what will be its impact on the waste minimization? It will ultimately encourage the adaptation of more sustainable waste management practices that minimize pollution and resource depletion. Yes, pollution will be reduced, that I have already discussed. But resource depletion will also be checked. Suppose you have selected a very fertile land for waste deposition. What will happen? Once you are depositing waste, you cannot use that land for agriculture, at least not within the 10 years, because there will be toxicity in that soil due to the toxic waste deposited there, if any. You cannot control, you cannot regulate the what type of waste is deposited there. Macro regulation is okay, but micro regulation you cannot do. So there will be some very dreaded toxic materials mixed in the soil, mainly from the medical waste. If they deposit medical waste in that land where you selected, then it is very dangerous. It will contaminate the soil. You cannot use it for environment. You cannot use it for agriculture, right? So if you can select environment, if you are considering environmental and social criteria also, then only you can encourage adoption of more sustainable waste management practices that will ultimately minimize the pollution and resource depletion. Also, it will raise community awareness because community acceptance is also here one of the factors, social factors. So, all the community has accepted that okay, you can use this land for waste deposition. There will be no problem, no hostility from the neighborhood population. Okay, so ultimately, you can also foster a culture of responsible waste management. You can train them, and also you can drive innovation in waste treatment technologies that have lower environmental footprints. Right? If there is no hostility from the common people, if there is no chance of contamination of the resource around that land, and if there is no chance of resource depletion also, okay, and the chance of pollution aggravation is also reduced due to the intelligent selection of sites, then what will happen? You can innovate different waste treatment technologies in the goal to lower the environmental footprint. Okay, so once you selected a site, you can also do many additional implication of that site selection in relation to waste minimization. Okay, so one thing you can enforce is that you can reduce waste generation at the source itself. You can encourage innovative product design, innovative packaging, and behavioral changes, right? Again, you can encourage the manufacturer or the waste generator to recycle and compost its waste. You can create some mechanism to generate energy from waste. And ultimately, you can ensure extended producer responsibility. Okay, so you can hold the producers responsible for the end of life management of their products, incentivizing waste reduction in product design. So we can introduce that also. That incentive will ensure that some waste minimization is taking place. So you must distribute the responsibility of waste management to the producer also, not only to the for the government agencies. The waste, whoever is producing waste, they must be reprimanded if they do not follow the laws of the nation. They must be encouraged to adapt. They must be encouraged to innovate different techniques such that waste minimization can become a possibility. Right? So, in conclusion, what I want to say is that while primarily focused on site selection, this present case study offers indirect insights into factors that can facilitate waste minimization. Efficient waste transportation, strategic land use planning, and a strong emphasis on environmental and social considerations can all contribute to reducing waste that I have already discussed. However, a comprehensive waste minimization strategy requires a broader approach to waste generation, treatment, and resource recovery. So ultimately, it must be a broader approach. Government must plan. Only if you, the owner of the land, if you are planning, nothing will happen. If a owner of a residential complex is planning something bigger than the plans of the individuals will take place, but not as bigger as government uh, policy can do. So government must think about a comprehensive waste minimization strategy, the comprehensive waste generation, treatment, and resource recovery policy. Then only we can ensure minimum waste. But what this case study has ensured that while selecting suitable site for land filling, they have ensured that we must identify the land for landfilling very intelligently, such that we can reduce the requirement of transportation, right? And if we include various environmental and social consideration, we can at least plan to achieve some of the sustainable development goals as prescribed in the UN meeting, I think last year, 2023, right? So, and as you know, that environmental degradation is rampant nowadays. Climatic extreme can easily be observed in various, why I will say various, in most of the places of the world. So if you want to stop it and recover from there you must plan accordingly. And one of that plan must include intelligent site selection for landfilling, such that one of the major reason of pollution, environmental pollution, can be checked. That is waste generation, and when waste mixes with the water, wastewater generation, these two things are two of the most dreaded reason why the pollution has been increased, and so is the GHGs, greenhouse gases has increased, and so is the global warming has increased, and as a result, climate change is taking place all over the world, not only in the third world country. Many developed countries has also faced the wrath of climate change, right? So one of the aspect, if you can ensure to minimize waste by uh, what I can say, considering environmental and social criteria while selecting the landfill, to implement objective site selection procedures at the time of selecting the landfill. Okay? And lastly, you must select your landfill sites nearest to the site from where waste is generated. So that is the three things that was suggested by this case study, which we must consider for selecting the sites. But amazingly, what happened is that the authors have planned to select the site, but the readers find some very important and essential factors of waste minimization. Now, the case study that I was referring to from the very beginning is the site selection of municipal solid waste incineration plant using GIS and multi-criteria decision analysis. Okay, so this was the study which has ultimately given you three very important steps to towards waste minimization at the source. That means the very source where the waste is generated. They can actually adopt these techniques to minimize the waste generation within control. Okay, so if you wish, you can go to that Muhammad et al. Paper titled "Site Selection of Municipal Solid Waste Incineration Plant Using GIS and Multi-Criteria Analysis." It was published in the Journal of the Air and Waste Management Association, and in the year of 2022, and you can easily access it freely from, you say, Science Direct or from Scholar, Google Scholar, whatever you may use, right? So other than this is the case study that I have utilized, and remaining three papers I have referred, such that if required I can give some supporting data. So yes, my collection of data is concentrated on Agartala only. But if I want to use some data from Meghalaya, Arunachal, or Assam, then we must depend upon those areas, right? So with this, I conclude this podcast also. But the point of discussion of the last 30 minutes is that even if you are going for certain objective, some other very important, very significant objectives can be achieved by implementing MCDM and GIS for selecting the sites. Okay, so the main thing is that you are selecting a sites very objectively, very optimally, very intelligently, but ultimately it is aiding in minimization of waste, which is a very big problem for the government all over the world. Okay, so thank you for your patient hearing. If you like this podcast, please like, share, and subscribe. And if you find this podcast useful, even very little, try to subscribe this newsletter so that I become encouraged to create more content which may help you later on. Okay. So thank you and goodbye for now.